Jessica Mallory seemed like the perfect Florida girlfriend, beautiful, calm, and devoted. But when her boyfriend Daniel Reyes lay dying on their kitchen floor, his final whispered words exposed a chilling truth that would unravel her carefully crafted life. What appeared to be a tragic accident was only the beginning of a shocking story of lies, greed, and a deadly plan buried beneath a smile. The Florida sun had just begun to dip behind the palm trees when sirens pierced the calm of a quiet Clearwater neighborhood. The rhythmic flashes of red and blue lights cut across the still evening, bouncing off mailboxes and freshly washed cars. Residents peeked through their curtains, whispering to one another as paramedics hurried into the White House on the corner of Palm Breeze Lane. Minutes earlier, a shaky 911 call had reported a man severely injured. The caller was a woman whose voice sounded controlled, too steady for someone witnessing a tragedy. Inside the home, chaos reigned. Chairs were overturned, glass was shattered across the tiled kitchen floor, and a streak of blood led toward the living room. Daniel Reyes, a 32-year-old construction worker, lay motionless, struggling to take shallow breaths. His skin was pale, his pulse fading. The paramedics worked frantically, calling out for oxygen and trying to stop the bleeding. His eyes fluttered open for a moment, glassy and unfocused, and he tried to form words. A nearby officer knelt close, straining to hear the faint whisper that escaped Daniel's lips. The words were barely audible, but they carried enough weight to freeze everyone in the room. Seconds later, Daniel's chest stopped moving, and the monitors fell silent. Detectives arrived shortly after, sealing off the area as neighbors gathered outside. They recognized the house. It belonged to Jessica Mallory, Daniel's girlfriend of 2 years. She stood on the porch, arms wrapped tightly around herself, her expression strangely blank. Her explanation to police was simple. Daniel had tripped, fallen onto a broken bottle, and bled too quickly for her to help. But as investigators glanced at the scene, something felt wrong. The injuries on Daniel's body looked too severe to be from a simple fall. There were signs of a struggle, furniture pushed aside, a faint outline of a handprint smeared in blood on the counter. Detective Laura Jensen took note of every detail: the bleach bottle under the sink, the faint chemical smell in the air, and the trash bag hastily tied in the corner. It didn't look like an accident, and yet, Jessica stood firm in her story, her calm demeanor almost rehearsed. As the body was taken away and the evidence collected, one thought lingered in everyone's mind. Whatever Daniel had whispered before he died, it wasn't random. It was a message, a clue that pointed to the person standing right outside the door. The investigation began before dawn, with detectives piecing together the scattered fragments of Daniel Reyes's final hours. Jessica Mallory sat in the small, windowless interview room at the Clearwater Police Department. Her blonde hair was perfectly brushed, and her clothes were spotless despite what she claimed had been a frantic effort to save her boyfriend's life. She repeated the same story over and over, describing how Daniel had slipped during an argument and fallen onto a broken bottle. She said she panicked, tried to clean the blood, and called 911 when she realized he wasn't breathing. To the untrained ear, it sounded convincing, but to the detectives watching from the other side of the glass, something didn't add up. Back at the house, the forensic team uncovered evidence that contradicted Jessica's statement. Blood spatter patterns showed signs of multiple impacts, not a single fall. The cleaning products scattered under the sink appeared recently used, and faint streaks on the floor hinted that someone had tried to wipe it down before help arrived. Detectives also discovered Daniel's phone on the counter, its screen cracked but still functional. When the digital team examined it, they found a half-typed message that stopped mid-sentence. "If anything happens to me, it's her." The timestamp suggested Daniel had started writing it just minutes before the 911 call. When officers returned to question Jessica again, her confident tone began to falter. She claimed Daniel had a habit of drinking too much, that he might have fallen while angry. Yet toxicology reports later showed no alcohol in his system. Neighbors gave statements describing loud arguments from the house in the past week and objects being thrown late at night. One neighbor mentioned seeing Jessica's car leave the driveway around the time she claimed to have been performing CPR. That inconsistency caught the detectives' attention. As the day went on, whispers spread through the neighborhood. People remembered Jessica as friendly but private, someone who smiled easily but never shared much about her life before moving in with Daniel. The more the police learned, the clearer it became that this was no tragic accident. Daniel's final words, the evidence of cleanup, and the unfinished text all pointed in one direction. Behind Jessica Mallory's composed face and quiet voice, detectives sensed something darker, something carefully hidden that was finally beginning to unravel. Detectives began digging into Jessica Mallory's past, hoping to understand what kind of woman Daniel had trusted. What they found was a pattern too precise to ignore. Public records showed that Jessica had been married twice before, both relationships ending abruptly after tragic accidents. Her first husband, a mechanic named Aaron Blake, had died in a car crash just 6 months after they wed. Her second husband, a real estate agent named Thomas Reed, had fallen down a flight of stairs in what was ruled an unfortunate mishap. In both cases, Jessica collected large insurance payouts and moved to a new city soon after. To the detectives, this string of coincidences was too neat to be believable. Financial records uncovered a familiar story. Jessica had taken out a new life insurance policy on Daniel 3 months before his death, worth $250,000, naming herself as the sole beneficiary. The agent who sold her the policy confirmed. She seemed oddly eager to finalize the paperwork, even joking that Daniel was accident-prone. Investigators now had a motive: money. But what made it more chilling was how organized everything appeared. Jessica wasn't acting on impulse. She had planned carefully, the same way she had in her previous relationships. Detectives also noticed several online transactions in the days before Daniel's death: purchases of cleaning supplies, gloves, and bleach. The timestamps matched the night before the incident. A search of Jessica's laptop revealed disturbing queries: how to erase fingerprints, how long for blood to dry, and can bleach remove DNA? Each search painted a clearer picture of intent. Friends of Daniel came forward, revealing that he had recently grown distant and worried. He had confided that Jessica was becoming controlling and secretive, keeping him from talking to his family. He even told a coworker he planned to end the relationship soon. That conversation happened only 3 days before his death. By now, the investigators had enough to see a pattern of predatory behavior. Jessica had built a life around deception, moving from one relationship to another, always leaving behind tragedy and profit. But this time, her carefully constructed plan had one fatal flaw. Daniel's final breath had carried her name, ensuring that, for once, her past would not stay buried. As detectives continued their investigation, Jessica's confidence began to crumble. What had started as a composed and carefully maintained front now showed cracks. When she was called in for further questioning, her tone shifted from calm to defensive. She claimed the insurance policy was only a precaution, insisted her internet searches were for cleaning advice, and dismissed the evidence as coincidence. But every explanation sounded rehearsed, and the detectives could sense her unease. They noticed how she avoided eye contact whenever Daniel's name was mentioned, and how her hands fidgeted under the table. The woman who once seemed in control was starting to lose her grip. Forensic experts completed their report, and it painted a grim picture. Daniel's injuries were not consistent with a fall but with repeated blows from a blunt object. Traces of sedatives were found in his bloodstream, meaning he had likely been drugged before the attack. Investigators returned to the house to re-examine the scene, this time focusing on the kitchen trash bag that had seemed unimportant before. Inside, they found paper towels soaked with cleaning chemicals and a broken piece of glass bearing both Daniel's and Jessica's fingerprints. It was enough to strengthen the case against her. Detectives then obtained surveillance footage from a neighbor's security camera that contradicted Jessica's timeline completely. The video showed her leaving the house late that evening and returning 20 minutes later, carrying what appeared to be a small plastic bag. This was during the exact time she had claimed to be performing CPR on Daniel. Her story was unraveling fast. Meanwhile, forensic analysts managed to recover deleted messages from Daniel's phone. In them, he mentioned feeling unsafe and that Jessica had been pressuring him to sign financial documents. The texts were dated just a day before his death. Investigators now had motive, means, and opportunity all pointing directly to her. When detectives presented the evidence, Jessica's composure broke completely. She became erratic, insisting she was being framed, yet offering no explanation for the overwhelming proof. The officers had seen it many times before, guilt finally catching up. Her plan had relied on control, but Daniel's final whisper and the evidence left behind had destroyed that illusion. The truth she had worked so hard to bury was now fully exposed, and her downfall was inevitable. The courtroom was silent as the trial began, every seat filled with reporters, neighbors, and curious onlookers. Jessica Mallory entered wearing a plain gray suit, her once confident smile replaced by a hollow stare. Prosecutors laid out the story piece by piece, starting with Daniel's suspicious injuries, the sedatives in his system, and the insurance policy that gave Jessica financial motive. The evidence was overwhelming, but what truly shook the room was the 911 recording. When the audio played, Daniel's faint, labored voice could be heard whispering Jessica's name moments before his death. It wasn't loud, but it was clear enough to send chills through everyone listening. The prosecution described Jessica as a calculated manipulator who had used charm to build relationships and greed to destroy them. The defense tried to paint her as a woman trapped in unfortunate coincidences, but the mountain of evidence made that story impossible to believe. Witnesses from her past testified about similar patterns of behavior, insurance policies, sudden debts, and Jessica's quick departures after collecting payouts. The jury watched her expression remain blank as each detail surfaced, almost as if she had accepted her fate. When the verdict was finally read, the courtroom remained tense. The foreperson stood and announced Jessica Mallory guilty of first-degree murder. Gasps echoed through the room, and Jessica's body seemed to go rigid, her eyes fixed on the floor. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, citing her deliberate planning and lack of remorse. Reporters outside captured every moment, labeling her the Florida Black Widow in headlines that spread across the country within hours. Back in Clearwater, residents struggled to make sense of what had happened in their quiet community. The White House on Palm Breeze Lane remained empty for months, a silent reminder of the secrets that once hid behind its walls. Daniel's family held a small memorial near the ocean he loved so much, scattering his ashes as the waves rolled in gently under the setting sun. Though his life had ended too soon, his final words had ensured that the truth was heard. It was that whispered name, spoken in his last breath, that brought justice to light and exposed the darkness that had been hiding in plain sight.